Hey everyone, Chris here, and what you're about to listen to is an RH Gaiden, part of the content that is exclusive to our patrons over at Patreon. So if you want to hear more content like this, and you're just interested in supporting us in general, just head over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/retrohangover, or you can find it at linktree/retrohangover. That's linktr.ee/retrohangover, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Welcome, patrons, to another episode of Retro Hangover Gaiden. We are here this evening because we are recording in the evening, which is unusual for us actually, because we're typically in the daytime. But the sun has set, and we are here to gripe about shit because I am here for that, and I am joined by a couple of our most esteemed patrons. Lyle and Randall. So Lyle, Randall, say hello to the other patrons.
Hello, other patrons.
Hello, other patrons. And I'm sorry, did you say that we were esteemed or steamed?
I think he said we were steamed at like boiled.
If you would like to be hams, then yes, you are steamed. I'm okay.
Well, no, I just thought that given our response to this topic that we were all pretty steamed by it.
Yeah, there you go.
This is, I keep telling Chris, we got to get like a rim shot sound effect, just like on reserve for this kind of shit. But at any rate, yeah. So as the title might imply, we are talking about games as a service, or otherwise known as live services. If you've ever watched Jim Sterling, then you know that he also hates this shit. Much like the other Gaidens, we're not necessarily going to have a whole lot of a structure around this thing necessarily. We just thought, you know what? This seems like something that we would want to have a discussion about. And I think amongst the three of us, we've got quite a bit to say on it. So I don't know. Anybody want to kind of start us off with some opening thoughts?
I mean, we could totally go with either maybe starting out on a happy note, like why games as a service could be a good thing. I thought about that earlier. You kind of lift it up and then we can slam dunk it later.
we could also start with the very lovely Wikipedia definition so that it's very clear what we're talking about.
That's true.
Oh, hell yeah, that's true. You know, we need to make sure that people are aware that we do very extensive research on the things that we're talking about.
Listen, this is the finest research that 40 seconds in Google can get you.
That's right. This is the best research that the Patreon money can buy. But that is a good point. So maybe some folks might not be super familiar with this particular notion of a live service, at least in terms of games. And so at a very high level, games as a service is something that came about really with the advent of massively multiplayer online games, or MMOs. And if you look at some of the documentation around this, they'll tend to say that it came along with like somewhere around the WoW era, World of Warcraft, but technically it was before that. We did have some persistent online worlds that did exist before World of Warcraft, or even EverQuest or Ultima Online. It goes back a ways. So this does have a bit of a lineage, but the idea really is that it centers around essentially a revenue model. That's really the crux of the whole thing anyway. So these live services are vectors for, publishers and developers to monetize their games after that like initial point of sale transaction. So, once they've sold you the $60 retail game, they can also throw some other shit in there, whether it's a subscription model or microtransactions or what have you. Or this is in most cases the lifeblood of a free-to-play game. Because if the entry cost is 0, then they've got to make their money back somehow. So typically games that are released under this kind of model tend to receive really long tails in terms of like content additions, or perhaps indefinite if the game happens to last that long, which a lot of them do not. But this is what
I would say so far nothing has lasted indefinitely.
That's very fair.
Ooh, well, we're getting deep already. Geez. Game entropy. But yeah, so this tends to lead to some people referring to these kind of games as like living games or live games, or like what we're referring to as like live services, really, because they're always changing as these updates come across. So that's kind of like a background of what a game as a service is. And so I think I like the idea that Randall put out there. Let's talk a little bit about why this may be good, or why it is something that is as prevalent as it is.
I also have some thoughts that I want to dovetail on the end of that about things that make it somewhat sensible.
Sure.
And the cases in which that's true.
Sure.
Okay. If you want me to start off with probably what I think most people would attribute to maybe the best thing that a living game could give people. I always thought that a live service game, if done well, done correctly, which I will admit, I don't think I have ever really witnessed one. If that kind of sets the preface of how the rest of this will go. But for low-income families or families that maybe just can't afford like brand new games, like a live service game, like you spend that $160, and if you're lucky, that's all you spend on that game, and the kid will play that game for 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours, and it's like, okay, thank God I didn't have to buy them a new game every 2 weeks or every month, because like this one game has kept them busy, kept them connected to their friends, all that stuff.
I suppose I could see that. I feel like my immediate counter argument might be that you just need to tell your kids to suck it up and play the damn games that they have. But that's also coming from someone who like owned like 6 games, back in the day. And so like, there's a reason that I am good at Contra 3. Like, nobody's good at Contra 3. The reason that I am is because that was like one of the few games that I had for my Super Nintendo. And so I played it over and over again until now I know it like the back of my hand. But I do see where you're coming from, because with that longer tail on a game, then the hope is that that'll keep, your kid engaged with it much longer than a finite, single player experience, I suppose. I think the danger with that though, is that the sort of inherent monetization model that comes along with a lot of live services nowadays might arguably be even more detrimental to low income families if and this is predicated on if your child somehow gets access to your credit card and starts buying a bunch of Fortnite skins. You know what I mean?
I was just thinking about that whole what was it, the kids spent like $15,000 in Fortnite and the mother went bankrupt and had to ask Epic Games to refund her.
Yeah exactly.
Again, like I did try to preface it with it had to be like a perfect live service game, of which they just don't exist, unfortunately. I don't know. There's going to be that one time your kids can be like, "Can I buy this one skin, please?" And it's like $20. You could have bought them a used game instead.
Right, exactly. But here's the thing, though, right? Is like you say they don't exist, and I think for the most part they kind of don't now. But this model made sense like 30 years ago. And that's when, when MMOs started coming around, it made sense both from just a business standpoint, but also from, a service standpoint that, it's fairly straightforward. You're like, okay, I'm paying this upfront cost for the software itself. So I'm paying my $60 that hasn't changed for inflation, and yet people still complain about it, which is another topic for another day. And then I'm going to pay this subscription fee of generally like $15 a month, and that is going to go towards the, upkeep of the game. It's, server costs, hosting, other overhead that they have that just goes into providing a live service. That all makes sense. And something like World of Warcraft, when it first came out, that was it. So that actually fits your description about what you were talking about, like, perfectly. It was, all right, I bought my kid WoW, and yes, I have to pay $15 a month for it, but that's it. I don't need to spend $60 on another game, because now this child has potentially infinite amount of playtime with this game for only $15 a month, Of course, that doesn't apply now, because even World of Warcraft has a shitload of microtransactions, but
I want to say you hit my points of why they make sense, is that at least why the subscription model for something like an MMO makes sense. It took me a long time to really get my head around it. Actually, it took me several years of being in the technology industry to really get my head around it. But it's, you pay the cost of developing the software, and that's your $60 purchase. But those servers don't run themselves, and that electricity doesn't grow on trees.
Arguably it does.
Okay, it could rain down from the sky, but at this point, even that's not free. After, several years in the technology industry, I really have my head more around how subscriptions make sense. Just from a financial standpoint of, you are continuing to receive a service and consume their resources. And so paying for those resources through a subscription seems reasonable. Like, frankly,
sure.
How the hell do they keep Diablo 2 running now? I mean, when was the last time somebody purchased Diablo 2? Shane, when was the last time you bought Diablo 2?
Ooh.
I mean, let's not talk about that, Lyle. No, but I mean, yeah, but that's a loss for them, right? Like, I'm sure that somebody at Activision Blizzard is like, why the fuck are we still why do we have this open?
Every month they run Diablo 2 servers. They're doing it at a loss. They have to be.
Probably. Well, not probably, but yes.
I mean, because that game, after you pay your $60 for it, they don't have a way to get any more of your money. And yet we still have some strange expectation that it's going to still be there.
Right. But I mean, yeah. So, and that's the thing, right? And I was thinking about this earlier today, kind of in prep for us talking about this. That is that sort of weird gray area, right? Because you've got the two extremes on the spectrum where you have just a purely either single player or like local co-op game that has no, online connectivity at all. And then you've got the complete other side where it's like a 100% live service, always on game that even if you're playing with nobody else, you still have to connect to the internet. But then somewhere in between there, you had that period of time where, and this might be where we got honestly a little spoiled, because we got so many of those games like Diablo 2 or literally anything that connected to battle.net or fucking battle.net itself. Like,
yeah,
that just being a thing was, I mean, I'm assuming that there was some, math going on there with somebody behind the scenes to say like, yes, it is going to cost us X amount of time, dollars and man hours to get this thing made, but the return on, player retention or players purchasing the game to play with other people is going to be such that it will offset, the hosting costs and whatnot, to provide this, connectivity service. But that was sort of like that very gray area there, because I don't know, and maybe one of you do, so maybe you can keep me honest on this, but I was thinking of something like Xbox Live, right? That was something that early on was, heralded as this like feature for a lot of, especially, first person shooters like Halo or something like that. Well, Halo 2 really, but where, it's like, hey, yeah, play the game, but also with Xbox Live, you can, tell people that you fucked their mom and maybe also play a game together, I guess. And like that was free-ish, right? Like you end up paying for like an Xbox like gold subscription or whatever the hell it is they call it, So I don't know if that money that like is getting paid to Microsoft or like Sony in their case for their system with Sony, the PlayStation Plus, like, I don't know if that sort of subsidizes the costs for the developers. Like, I don't know if developers and publishers get like a cut of that like Xbox Live money or not.
I think
because that would make sense, but I don't know.
I
don't
imagine
know,
they
but
don't.
I have a competing theory. And
Sure.
I think it's not that they get some of the revenue, but I think it means that there are parts of the infrastructure cost that they don't have to bear. So it's
That's
like,
a good point.
like with Xbox Gold, Live, Platinum, Tequila, whatever, or PlayStation Plus, whatever it is.
Xbox Patron.
Yes, that. PlayStation has my friends list. When I want to play, I go into my PlayStation and say, okay, here are the people that are my friends. Like, let me go play with them. That's all infrastructure that I'm thinking specifically. The one I played on PlayStation a lot was Destiny and Destiny 2 some. But like, I could go in and Sony had to do a lot of that infrastructure work, which gets us why we don't have a lot of cross plays, because infrastructure is hard.
Well, because Sony mostly.
Well,
but, yeah.
I mean, it's not always Sony. It's as soon as somebody says they're willing, somebody else has to say, no, we're not. Sometimes Sony's the bad guy. Sometimes Microsoft's the bad guy. Sometimes they're both the bad guy.
Sometimes it's the person in between that's the bad guy. Sometimes the developer says, well, we want to have our own infrastructure and we don't want to run off of your proprietary system. And then they're like, wait, but you have to deal with this anyway. They're like, no.
See, I've had one game that I cross-played between PC and PlayStation that they do run their own infrastructure, and it seems to work really well.
And what is that?
FF14.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I started that on console because at the time that I started playing it, I didn't have a gaming PC.
Right.
I transitioned to a gaming PC. Did have to repurchase the client for the PC software. But then, my character comes over. I can switch back and forth. Like, I could go play it on my PlayStation now while we're talking. And it's the same character as on PC.
That is true. And unfortunately, that is a rarity.
Yeah.
Because like something like Genshin Impact, for example, I was like all excited when they first released because they were going to be like, they're like, oh, it's going to be on PS4 and PC and mobile. And I'm like, hell yeah, I can play this game everywhere. And then they were like, oh, but also your PlayStation characters are exclusive to PlayStation and they do not cross-play with mobile or PC. Like,
oh,
neat. Never mind.
Yeah, that sucks.
But I think the reason that Final Fantasy can do that is they're bearing all of the infrastructure costs. They're not taking advantage of any of Sony's built-in stuff. Hell, they're not even using Sony's like login stuff. So every time I go to launch the game, every time I go to launch the game on my PlayStation,
ass launcher that comes up,
and I have to type my account password every time I launch the game.
Yep.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I played Final Fantasy 14. I do remember my roommate in college was able to play on his PS4 while I was on my laptop, and we were able to play together.
Yeah.
And that was neat.
It is. So we've kind of circled around to, some games that do it well, and it looks like we have some differing opinions here, but I wanted to call out a couple of games that I thought have done something like this reasonably well. And I mean, clearly the MMOs are the leader in this space because that's where the economy makes sense. It makes sense that you are getting something very specific for that cost every month. They're running the servers where the game is going for you to play. They're providing a place for everybody to meet up.
Right.
But then you've got a game, one of the ones I've got on this list here, of Warframe. It is a free-to-play game. But I found with that one, at least, I felt more compelled to buy into their cash shop currency to buy things because I didn't have to. Because I could, it was a time trade-off. Do I want to spend the time to do this, or do I just want to throw some dollars at it?
Well, okay, so I
I
have my thoughts about that too, but
Same.
I mean, so here's the thing, right? I get what you're saying, and as well as an alleged adult, I can agree that sometimes we have frankly, we have more money than time on our hands. That is the case for a lot of people, at least in like discretionary small amounts. I'm not saying we're all fucking rolling around, Scrooge McDuck style or anything, but like sometimes you're just like, okay, do I want to grind for like 20 hours to get this like item, or do I just pay $4.99 and get the damn thing? So I can totally sympathize and I see that, but at the same time, not that I'm advocating for grinding, because I think that's also just a bad game design thing in the first place. So I'm basically calling out every JRPG ever. But like my problem with that is that I feel as though a lot of the cool like cosmetics or unlockable items or things like that you used to get in games, back in the day, a lot of those things get sacrificed at the altar of microtransactions. In that if this were a game that had been released, 20 years ago or something, then that like really neat new skin or something that you were going to get for your character that you can just buy in their cash shop would have been something that you would have gotten for actually playing the game and achieving something in the game, and then feeling that sense of accomplishment because I got this cool thing. And I get the sense that a lot of those sort of extraneous things like that, whether it's like, exclusive armor pieces or again, like cosmetics or whatever, are like specifically carved out of games with the sole intention of saying like, we're going to leverage these things to just make more money. And I know that that's like a very cynical outlook on it, but I feel like I'm not wrong necessarily. And it kind of bums me out because like
there are a lot of games I've seen where you're not wrong, where that's exactly what happens. The ones I'm thinking of, and the other one that's popping into my mind because it's what I'm playing a lot recently, is Guild Wars 2, where I don't think there's anything that's only available for purchase.
Right.
There's no items that are only available for purchase. You buy character slots and bank expansions and things like that, which are quality of life. But no, I take it back. Even then, they've got a game currency, real world currency exchange that goes both ways. So if what you want is, okay, I need 10 gold, which in Guild Wars 10 gold is a pretty decent chunk. If you need 10 gold to buy that item, you can go do events until you earn 10 gold, or you can spend a couple of bucks and get 10 gold. And so that's one of those where I can choose whether to spend dollars or time. And I used to really be against that, and I'm kind of not anymore, because, well, I have limited amounts of time, and if I can spend 10 bucks to get closer to a goal and be able to play and enjoy it with my friends. For me, that's always the key, is I'm playing these multiplayer on games to play with my friends. And so if I can spend an extra $5 or $10 and get to a more enjoyable experience playing with my friends, I feel like that's a reasonable trade-off. But if you've got the other where the only way you can get this item is to pay $10, I'm a lot less of a fan of that.
Well, that's, and that is the key. That is what I was going to say, is that I am on board with you if it is something that they provide two different paths to acquire, whether it is you spend the time and play the game and achieve it that way, or you spend the money and get it right away. I have way less of a problem with that than I do with games where it is like cash shop only items that you cannot get any other way. And that applies, by the way, to purely cosmetics, because I hear that argument all the time. People throw that out all the time, where they're just like, oh, well, but it doesn't affect the gameplay, man. Like, it's just a cool, like, helmet that doesn't give you stats. So like, who cares if it's exclusive to the cash shop? And it's like, well, again, that goes back to...
Nah, man. Cosmetics are the real end game.
Exactly. It's fashion souls, motherfucker. Like, I want to look cool. That's the whole point. Like, I don't want things to be locked behind a paywall in a game, especially in a game that I already fucking paid for. Like that is what really irks me. But it's that like thing that's always kind of nagging me in the back of my head of those things of just like, if it wasn't for this microtransaction, that neat thing that somebody wanted to include in the game when they were developing it probably would have been there, and I could have got it by scaling a fucking mountain and finding a treasure chest or some shit. I don't know, but like it bothers me that there are things like that you basically have to plunk down more money for.
Well, and I hate to like take it back to the Warframe discussion, but that kind of reminds me of the problem that I have with a game like Warframe. I played that game in alpha, I played it in closed beta, I did it in open beta, and I stopped playing whenever it went live. And then I came back, I think maybe like a year later. And the amount of like a time sink that game asks you to take, it's like, all right, well, if you play this every day, every hour of your life, you could keep up. But hey, man, if you want to keep up and have a life without playing this game, you could spend some money. And obviously,
did you want to sleep? That'll be $10, please.
Exactly. And I was like, what the fuck is this? This isn't the game that I liked. So, like I played it for a while with my friends. I dropped it again. And then, what was it? Plains of Eidolon or whatever, like their huge open world update. And it was like, okay, so I'm going to hop on my old Warframe. That was pretty decent at the time when I stopped playing. There hasn't been that many major content updates since I played. Let's see what happens. I load in. There has been like Warframe changes, like they balance the Warframes because the developers don't like certain play styles, so they completely ruin how some Warframes play. And it's like, oh, okay, so you have to go get a new Warframe, but grind out
that would have happened even if you had stayed current. That's balance patching in every game ever.
Well, that's fair, but in a lot of free-to-play games that I play, sometimes it's very simple to get a hold of a new character. In Warframe, to get like one of the newer Warframes takes hours, like literal like days to grind out like the parts. And it's like, or hear me out, bro, you could just buy it. And you're like, I don't like, I want to play with my friends and like not be dead weight. So like, I guess I'll spend the $10 or the $15 or the $20. And I have heard the argument from some people who do play Warframe on the regular that Plat is it's like a currency system that you can earn in game by like grinding out and playing. Problem is, it requires more grinding out and playing. So yes, you could technically get every cosmetic, every Warframe, everything in that game for free. Sure. But do I want to spend 5,000 hours on this game to unlock everything? I don't think someone should have to.
No, I totally agree.
And see, my counterpoint is, and this is why while I'm playing it, I don't mind spending the money. If you look at what Warframe is providing you for $0 versus what WoW is providing you for $15 a month, the amount of effort the company puts in isn't staggeringly different. And Warframe has no other way to get their money back. Like, unless they start charging you for the game, paying a subscription's worth of cash into it every month that you're playing to buy stuff doesn't seem unreasonable. But it's when you want to pay a subscription's worth of it every day to play it that's a little different.
No, but I think, and Randall, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where you were going with that, and if you are, I tend to agree, is that, listen, we're all realistic here, right? In that we understand that there are costs involved with providing an ongoing service like a game. I mean, even anything like a free thing like Google stuff, like Gmail. Like Gmail is free, but they're making their money in other ways. And
AdSense.
So, right, exactly. And so we get it, right? That things cost money. We live in a society. But my problem with it is how they are going about their monetization. And that's, I think, what Randall's getting at, because that's what bothers me about games like Warframe, where Do they need to make some money from the people playing in order to keep the lights on? Yes, absolutely. But when they do it in such a like psychologically manipulative manner and exploit our sort of innate senses of, that fear of missing out or FOMO, that's just super shitty. And the only word I can think of for that is manipulative, because that's what it is. I mean, and there are some folks from the game industry that have gone on record. There's an interview with one guy in particular that just lays this all out, that a lot of companies, especially ones that specialize in these free-to-play model games like this, have psychologists like on staff to like basically instruct them, like, this is how to develop this game in a way to, exploit people to the maximum effect. And that's super shitty.
Yeah. Not to mention, to go back to the amount of a time sink for something like Warframe, the way that it manipulates you to spend money is like, yes, you grinded out the parts, but guess what? In order to build these parts, it's going to take literal 3 life days for it to finish. But or you could spend money to speed it up. And for some people, that's okay. And if Warframe's your game, I'm all for it, bro. If it makes you happy, it makes you happy.
I don't know. I really wanted to like Warframe. Like, I like the whole idea of it. I like the aesthetic they've got going on. But I tried to get into it at least 3 or 4 times, and I stuck around longer on some than others, but just the core of how that game is built, I have a hard time agreeing with. And it doesn't even necessarily directly have anything to do with, what we're talking about necessarily, but it kind of feeds into it in that the only way to progress your account's level is to continually level new Warframes. And for me, I hate that idea, because I'm somebody who likes to find something I like and stick with it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different topic.
I've kind of seen both sides of that one. They're encouraging you to try all the things, which is great.
But I don't want to.
Yeah, unless you want to find the thing you like and just stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to bring the mood up just a little bit, since Lyle did bring up Warframe to say what was good about it, I will say that I also wrote a game on the list for games that seemingly do it well, and it's a TCG made by Riot Games called Legends of Runeterra. It's a free-to-play card game, and I personally think, while it still can be kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Predatory.
Thank you. That's the predatory. No, predatory is exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Essentially, in Legends of Runeterra, the way that you earn cards, if people have ever played like Hearthstone or Magic Arena, something like that, there's wild card systems where, like, hey, you get a 1 rare or a 1 common, and you get to pick the card that you get, which is really like that can kind of start the predatory issue. Like, that's kind of what happened with Hearthstone. Like, dust became a problem. It's like, oh, well, they're rotating cards out so fast that I have to use my dust to craft meta stuff in order to stay relevant. And it's like, oh, okay, this game's just garbage. Legend of Runeterra, so far, doesn't do rotations, and they've been adding a lot of cards. They do game balancing a lot more than Hearthstone did. So I guess you could make an argument like, if I spent actual money on this card, I don't want it to change because I bought it because it was strong. It's like, well, they kind of do put it out there on the billboard saying, hey, that this game has like live service updates. Cards will get nerfed or buffed if they need to be. So fair warning.
Right.
But the best part about Legends of Runeterra is the weekly vault system that they have, and that's just from playing. Like, you just play the game, and by the end of the week, so it resets every Tuesday, by the end of the week, if you've played a lot of games, or even if you've played a little bit of games, because you'll get a weekly vault even if you haven't played at all. But it levels up as you play, and you get more wild cards and more free cards. And I think if you grind it all the way out, which I think someone did the math on it once, if you play 50 games of Legends of Runeterra throughout the week, mind you, isn't a small feat.
Yeah. Well, how long does an average game take?
10 minutes, 15 minutes. So
okay,
it's kind of a grind. It's a card game at that point, so you gotta like sit down and like, oh, I have to think. Anyways, by the end of it, you get the end-game currency, which allows you to craft cards. You get plenty of wild cards, even for their like mythics, which in Legends of Runeterra is the champions. And then you get plenty of like other wild cards for their commons, their rares, their ultra rares, what have you. And it's like, oh, so this game essentially pays you to play it, and how Riot makes their money is off of card backs and board skins, and like there's like these little creatures that sit on the board that like make faces at you if you take damage or if you deal damage, something like that. So they make their money off of the cosmetic part of the game and kind of just let you play the game for free. And Riot, we could have an entire discussion, or at least I could by myself, have an entire discussion on how predatory Riot is as a company on the inside and out. But I think they did a pretty good job with Legends of Runeterra.
And that's fair. There are definitely other examples of some that do it fairly well and some that are kind of shit at it. But I guess the thing too, right, is just on a higher level, talking about just games as a service as a whole. And I know this seems to be like a tug of war between Randall trying to keep this positive and me just dragging it back down into the mud. So
no, I like it.
But my problem with it is, and this is something that I kind of talked about in our first ever entry into video games were a mistake for the bonus audio content feed. But my issues with it are this: can games do it correctly? Sure. Have they? Yes, absolutely. Does it make sense for certain types of games? Absolutely, yes, it does. MMOs, free-to-play games, sure. They need a way to survive. I get it. The issue comes when the game industry does what the game industry do, which is they try to shoehorn this shit into everything. And they do this whenever there is something that is popular. Everybody tries to jump on the bandwagon, whether it makes sense for them or not. And eventually it all comes crashing down around them. And they stand there looking around going, I don't know what happened. This was supposed to work so well. And they never learn from this either. And so it started with the MMOs. I mean, how many times did anybody hear the words WoW killer in the 10 years after WoW came out? Everybody wanted to be the next World of Warcraft because it was making Blizzard money hand over fist. And the reality of these live services is that it is intrinsically unsustainable. Not every single game that gets released can feasibly be a live service, because ain't nobody got time for that. I don't have time for it. Like, I have time for maybe one, maybe 1.5 if I don't dedicate myself to another one. But if you want to invest yourself in one of these ongoing living games like this in a like meaningful way, they're structured such that you really don't have the time to do that with another one. So it blows my mind that all of these, AAA development houses seem to think that they need to do this with everything and then wonder why their player numbers drop off. I mean, one of the most recent examples was the new Avengers game. At its core, that game should have been a fairly straightforward third-person action beat 'em up with some decently high production value, and you follow along a campaign. And you know what? Maybe you have online co-op. Cool, great, fine, done. But did they do that? No, they didn't. Instead, they decided to shoehorn in a shitload of microtransactions in a cash shop. They have a roadmap for their content. Oh my God, I hate the term roadmap. I never want to hear roadmap when someone is talking about a new game, like, ever again, because it's so I immediately go, okay, cool. So you guys have these plans for like 2 years out, and like 90% of the time you're not going to follow this because shit's going to happen. So why even bother? You know, it bothers me that they feel like they need to put this into everything. I mean, and I was going to hold up indie games as like a great example of how you can have a very successful, both critically but also financially, game without doing this shit. But now even indie devs are trying to get in on this because everybody sees dollar signs and not everybody can pull it off.
Yeah. And I guess to bring it down further, there are even free-to-play games nowadays that used to be good, but like fell victim to the dollar signs. Like on the list that for the games that do this very badly, I wrote League of Legends. I've been playing it for almost 10 years. It used to be good at doing the free-to-play thing. Oh, it's gotten so terrible. They lock certain game features behind paywalls. They've actively said, like, we will not develop cheaper content because it's not feasible, quote unquote, not feasible for us to create cheaper content for you. And then there's the occasional pay to win skin because obviously it's a competitive game. It's going to happen somewhere along the line. It's going to happen.
Dude, God, fuck that argument. I hate that. Like, there are so many, especially like the biggest ones. Like, you get these things from fucking EA or Activision or Ubisoft when they come out and they're just like, well, it's just like video games. They're hard. Like, they cost so much money to make, and like we have to pay people. And I'm like, dude, go fuck yourself. It's a self-imposed problem. Okay. This is like if your friend went out and like they got a raise at work, right? And so they went out and they spent all their money on a brand new house and a convertible. And then they
Blackjack
come
and
over
hookers
later and complain to you of like, bro, like, I don't know what to do. I just like, I have so many bills. Like, yeah, of course you do. You don't need to sink that much money into that shit. It's the same thing with these developers. It's a cyclical problem where they're just like, well, clearly what sells games is turning them all into like Michael Bay summer blockbusters. And so we need to blow millions or billions of dollars on this crap to, you know, get that ray tracing shit in there because that's what the kids like. And then they come back and have the balls to be like, well, we're not making enough money for this to be sustainable. And so, you know, we have to put in these microtransactions and we have to put out additional DLC and blah, 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 blah. And like, no, you don't have to do that. If you scaled that shit back and maybe focused on what really mattered, which is the gameplay, and less about how much money can you spend to make this game look real good, then I just feel like it wouldn't solve itself, but it would probably be less of a problem. But again, they operate in the short term, right? And so none of these people seem to have a long-term vision for anything. And so as long as they can satisfy their shareholders in the short term with something, and then, you know, get out quickly and then go to another company and do it all over again, then they're fine. And they don't really care who they burn along the way.
But it sounds like what you want is for them to have a roadmap.
No, I don't. God damn it. No, I don't. Nobody gets a map of any roads.
I mean, I guess the most egregious, most recent thing of roadmap, syndrome is Cyberpunk 2077.
Oh my God.
Did you see their roadmap? 2022, they said the game will be finished.
Yeah,
that's effectively what it said.
You know, I checked out on that game long before I saw anything about that.
Did you enjoy it?
No, I checked out.
You checked. Oh, I thought you checked it out, not checked out of it.
Nope.
No, he was gone.
Yeah, no. There were entirely too many red flags waved for me to even consider that game. I
kind of did that with Fallout 76. I'm a West Virginia native. I thought Fallout 76 was going to be the greatest game of all time. They couldn't even get the damn map right. Like the Kanawha River does not flow right through the capital. I'm just sorry that game. Are you saying so much?
Are you saying they put the rednecks and the hillbillies too close together?
Well, okay, that too. Like if you go, so just I know this is kind of a tangent, but if you ever played Fallout 76, if you went north, that's like where all the cryptids and whatnot were in the game. But that makes like zero sense because the farther north in West Virginia you go, the closer you get to like Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, like Maryland, all that stuff, you get closer to cities where most of us boonies, we stay down here in the South. We don't go up there where all them rich folk like to hang out. And you get people like the Mothman and Sasquatch and the banjo twanging. You get that the further south you go. But the game was like, no, everything will be nice and simple down in the South, and everything will be nice and technological. And no, and then you go north and you get to fight demons and shit. Like, did you consult anybody about this game?
Or maybe it's just a commentary on Pittsburgh.
Maybe. Not to mention,
it was probably written by somebody who's had to drive in Pittsburgh.
That too. I mean, not to mention like the $5 fridge problem in that game. Like,
Jesus, it's fucking horse armor all over again.
It was literally horse armor all over again. They ripped off modding content. This is like the most egregious like live service game is when you exploit your fan base to like sell shit to them. Like, our collector's edition will have this canvas bag. Probably people have seen the fiasco around the canvas bag.
Yes.
The Nuka Rum, people probably know about that too. That's a real life scamming. That's not cool. Live service games shouldn't come into my real life and fucking scam
me. These are actual people crimes.
Exactly.
It's okay if you scam me in video games, but don't scam me in real life. I'll get mad.
I'll get very mad.
Oh man, that's good. I mean, yeah, that reminds me of like when they decided to change the Skyrim, the version that they had on Steam, to use the workshop and started monetizing mods. That was such horseshit.
And then they have to they screwed it up so bad that's why the special edition had to be its own thing. Like they couldn't release it as a DLC pack. They had to release it as its own thing because they had screwed up the workshop.
Yep.
On the previous version. Something like that.
Yeah. And so I guess for me, outside of just like the very real like monetary issues that come with this whole shebang, like it really does also just come down to time. And we've touched on that a little bit already, but I feel like I need to reiterate, I don't want daily quests or like weekly goals in my like otherwise single player experience, please. And thank you.
You don't want to do your video game chores?
No, dude, I don't. Like if I'm going into, a grindy free to play game or something, then I get it. Like I know what I'm fucking getting myself into. I'm doing it to myself, and that's fine. There's nobody to blame but me. But if I am going to, purchase a game that I intend to play myself, and it is not some persistent online world, or even I could make the argument that I don't think daily quests should even be a thing in online games either, like MMOs. I think it was one of the worst things that happened to WoW early on is when they started doing that, because it didn't start that way. You didn't have like daily fucking chore lists when WoW first came out.
Well, I think the idea is what they want is for those locusts who come in and devour the content in like the first week or two
to stay around,
to keep paying them for something, to have something
to
do, so they keep logging in.
Well, no, but that's exactly it. You're right. But the thing that I take issue with that, apart from the fact that me as a person, I know that any game that's going to have that shit in it, I am going to be compelled to do it all the time because I feel like I'm going to be missing out on critical stuff that I otherwise would not be getting. I mean, hell, I'm still playing Genshin and that shit's got that in there. So most of the time I log in just long enough to do like the daily commissions and then log out again because I have to do other shit. But then that's at the detriment of actually finishing the story. Like there's a good story in that game that I've been putting off because the amount of time that I have to play, I can only do like the daily quests because if I don't do them, something in the back of my head is going to be like, hey bro, you missed out today. And that's exactly what they want. But like, I get it, right? It's player retention. That's at the end of the day, that's what it is. And it's also low effort. It's how can we get people hooked on this thing so that they'll still give us money every month, but put the least amount of effort in. And that is, okay, let's put like 10 or 20 like cycling daily quests in here. It takes a minimal amount of time to do as far as development work is concerned. And we'll give them a little bit of a pittance of some materials or items or gold or whatever for doing them. And then if they do enough of them in a week, then we give them some other shit, I guess. And that's just like, it's hollow content. Like even if it's a minimal amount of time spent working on that, I would much rather that there just be like more actual like meaty stuff in a game to do than that sort of like, you know, very surface level stuff.
Yeah. The another issue, and I'll keep it brief. There's also games that kind of want their cake and eat it too. Like they want to keep the players with the dailies, but they also want you to pay for a full game. It pretty much being a single player experience, sometimes multiplayer. And then they're like, oh, so we're going to lock this stuff behind daily quests. Like your character needs to level in order to do this. And like the most recent example is like the newest Call of Duty. You have to buy the game. You have to buy like the DLC or whatever comes out for it. And then you have to level your character in order to use guns. And it's like, what? Can I not just drop into a game? I spent $60. Can I not just play? And you're like, nope.
No, I get it, man.
And don't forget like the terabyte of hard drive space you need to be able to install it.
Oh my God.
Oh Jesus.
It's I think it's over 500 gigs now, by the way. I'm not even joking. If you have Modern Warfare, Warzone, and Call of Duty Cold War, I think if all of those are installed, it's almost 500 gigs.
That's insane. That's like the amount of space on most actual consoles. Yeah, and that's the one that gets me the most is when they try to double or triple dip on this stuff. And honestly, the problem is they're going to keep doing it because they're testing the limits of what the market will bear, of what people are willing to pay for. And the folks that go out there and buy something like the new Call of Duty or pre-order it. Geez, don't even get me started on fucking pre-orders. But like, go out and buy this game and then buy all the extra crap that they're throwing in there and then sinking all the time into leveling their character just to play the actual game and then buying all the skins and blah, blah, blah. Like that's part of the problem. Like you are part of the problem and they're not going to stop as long as it's still making them money. I mean, I just saw an article, was it yesterday, the day before, it was talking about how Activision Blizzard and EA both from the time that games as a service really started to ramp up, so, you know, sort of near the advent of MMOs becoming very mainstream, till now, they have both increased their net worth on the order of magnitude of tens of billions of dollars. And they have gone on record as stating that they almost wholly attribute that growth to monetizing games in this fashion. So it's not going to stop. And it's a huge bummer because at the end of the day, like you can say what you want about the money, but at least from my personal opinion, I don't want every game that I think I want to play to become a job. Like I have a job. I play games to not be at job. So I don't need another one.
That's very fair. And if you think Blizzard's and EA's income is something crazy, I call it the Asian Disney, Tencent.
Oh, yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Their net income in 2017 was over $36 billion. And they're the ones that are the kings of microtransactions and penny pinching, just very evil people. I really don't like Tencent.
Not many people do. And they have their grubby little fucking free-to-play fingers in just about everything now. They're buying like shares in so many different gaming companies. I mean, they're involved with Activision Blizzard. They're the ones that are
10%,
working with them
I think.
on 10%. And they're heavily involved in the mobile version of Diablo that's supposed to be coming out at some point. So
Don't you have
can
phones?
imagine how that's going to go.
Everybody's got phones, right?
Yeah, you guys got phones.
So mad. I'm still mad about that. Chris likes to bring that one up just to piss me off.
I mean, it certainly does grind a lot of gears. Games as a service, in my opinion, like has the potential to be really good for certain people that like either can't afford regular mainstream gaming, maybe don't have access to PC bongs in Asian countries, like they thrive off of free to play games. So like,
Oh, yeah.
Actual livelihoods for free to play. But like, obviously, as you've been saying, Shane, and the dollar signs are just so large in their eyes that they try to Scrooge McDuck their way through everything. And it's so terrible.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, just to kind of, I guess, bring this to a little bit of some closure, I suppose. Like, I do not have anything against the idea of the games as a service model when it is applied appropriately. I still go back to the first wave of MMOs as I think what I believe to be the right way to do this, and for free to play games, because if they're giving you the product for free, they need to monetize it some way. Now, I would say that there are still a lot of intricacies in that on how they implement it, as to not be like overtly predatory about that shit. But I think it has its place. My problem lies solely with game companies overreaching and getting greedy and trying to jam this stuff into every single thing they make. And that shit needs to stop. Or like, I've gotten to the point where I've seen some games that I thought I was interested in, and as soon as I saw what their plans for it were, I checked out and I refused to buy it. And it's for these reasons specifically. So some closing remarks. So what do you guys got?
So I think any of these models can be done in a way that both the player community and the game company have a mutually beneficial relationship. And whether that is a free-to-play game that has me kicking back so they can keep building it, a subscription-based game that I pay for the maintenance every month, a game that allows me to choose whether I spend time or dollars. All of those can be done well. I think we've brought up ways that any one of those have been done fairly well.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's not the majority of how it's done. It seems like it's games that aren't happy with, a nice, even, mutually beneficial relationship. They just want all of your dollars.
Pretty much.
Give me my money. I guess my only closing part about all of this is just, as we've echoed, it can be done well. It can be done. It has been done wrong, and it has been done well. I would prefer that if it's going to continue to be done wrong, then I would hope that people start to hop on the bandwagon of just, you know what? We just don't want it then. I'd rather pay my $15 for this game and then just play it. Or my $60. Like, just sell me the damn game if you have to. But if you're going to do it wrong, just don't do it at all, is my opinion.
All right. Well, I think that's probably going to wrap up the discussion for us on games as a service. As I said, not any real structure around it, but I think we did some pretty good self-policing on this. We didn't go off on too many tangents because we certainly could have. I think all three of us have certain aspects of these things or games that are involved in this structure in some way that we probably could have talked much longer about. But overall, I think we kept it reined in. So good job, gentlemen. Back pats all around.
Yeah. Woo.
So I would like to, thank both Lyle and Randall for joining me on this one and putting together some quality RH Gaiden content for the rest of the patrons out there. So we hope that you are enjoying this stuff. And before I go ahead and close this thing down, is there anything that either of you would like to say? Anything that you'd like to plug at this time? Now is your chance.
Subscribe to Retro Hangover Podcast Patreon. If you're hearing this, then you already are. Subscribe for more money.
He said it, not me.
I have two things.
Okay.
First of all, come join us in voting to make Shane and Chris play the most horrible games we can think of. It's funny.
God damn it.
Yes.
Superman 64 is so bad.
You're welcome.
I guess I even put in like my own bad game, and I was like, wait, it's Superman 64. I have to vote for that. I have to vote for that one. I have to forget about mine.
I do want you to know, Shane, and I want to put this on record for everyone to know.
Sure.
I didn't just pick a game willy-nilly. I actually put in effort to do research to find a particularly bad game for you.
Wow. That's
evil.
love, Lyle. Thank you.
The actual evil.
This is also just informing me that I'm sure he has like a list like posted noted to his computer somewhere of just like things to torture Chris and Shane with next.
Post-it note, dude. He has an entire journal. What are you talking about? I just a post-it?
A fucking death note is what it is.
That's what it is.
And the other thing I wanted to plug is if you enjoy listening to me ramble on tangents, I do my own podcast where that's literally what we do. Someone once asked me what the topic was, and I laughed at them.
And said yes.
So you can check me out over at urandom-podcast.info. I'm sorry, the URL is bad. It's the best I could do. It's me and two of my good buddies.
Fantastic.
Me and two of my good buddies. We get together once a month and just talk about the things we find cool. We talk about cars, giant robots, Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, other comic companies, knives, food, and that's just in the last couple of months.
I was gonna say I was just waiting for it to get more like esoteric, just like the
philosophy.
Yeah, the very intricate history of carrier pigeons.
See, now you're making me want to put some of that in.
Please do.
Do it. Do it.
Imagine going to the pub and just catching up with your buddies once a month, except that the pub is my basement because we all live hundreds of miles away from each other, and we turn on a microphone.
Man, that's basically how this whole Retro Hangover thing started, and now look where we are.
Yeah.
Like scripts and shit. God.
Almost like you know what you're doing.
Almost just enough to fool everybody. All right. Well, I think with all of that being said, we are going to go ahead and close this one out. So thank you again to everyone that is listening to this one, and keep an ear out for the next entry into the Gaiden series. Chris has got quite a number of these lined up, actually. He's been a very a busy bee. So a lot of really awesome extra content coming your way.